Nobody could explain why the island had been abandoned. Fishermen avoided it. Sailors changed course whenever it appeared through the fog. Stories passed from one generation to the next spoke of strange lights moving between the trees and people who stepped onto its shores only to disappear forever. Mason Reed didn't believe any of it. Alongside journalist Clara Hayes, engineer Ethan Cole, and local guide Noah Price, he arrived determined to uncover the truth behind the rumors. But the moment their boat touched the shoreline, something felt wrong. The island was silent. No birds flew overhead. No insects buzzed through the air. Even the waves seemed quieter than they should have been. It was as though the island itself was holding its breath, waiting for them to take their first steps inland. What began as a simple investigation was about to become a nightmare none of them would ever forget. Deep within the island's dense forest, the group discovered something they never expected to find. Hidden beneath vines and years of overgrowth stood an entire village, abandoned but strangely untouched by time. Wooden homes remained standing. Furniture sat exactly where it had been left. Plates rested on tables as though families had simply stood up and vanished in the middle of dinner. The deeper they explored, the stranger everything became. Clara discovered unusual symbols carved into doorways and walls. Ethan found tools covered in rust yet arranged neatly as if someone had used them recently. Then Mason noticed something disturbing. Fresh footprints covered the dirt paths between the houses. They were clear, recent, and impossible to ignore. Yet there was nobody there. As darkness fell over the village, the silence returned, heavier than before, and somewhere beyond the trees, footsteps began circling their camp. None of them slept that night. The sounds continued until dawn, always close enough to hear but never close enough to see. Every time a flashlight swept across the darkness, the footsteps stopped. By morning, curiosity pushed them deeper into the mystery. Following the tracks left behind, they ventured farther into the forest where they discovered a collection of old photographs hidden inside one of the abandoned buildings. At first the images seemed ordinary, showing smiling villagers gathered together for celebrations and family portraits. But then Clara noticed something terrifying. In every photograph, standing somewhere in the background, was the same tall figure. It never changed position. It never looked at the camera. And no one in the photographs appeared aware of its presence. Later that evening, Ethan spotted a human-shaped silhouette watching from between the trees. By the time the others looked, it had vanished, leaving behind only a foul smell drifting through the forest air. Determined to find answers, the group followed a hidden path leading beneath a massive cliff and into a cave system buried beneath the island. The deeper they ventured underground, the colder the air became. Strange markings covered the walls. Thousands of names had been scratched into the stone, each accompanied by dates stretching back decades. Some names were recent. Others were nearly a century old. Near the deepest chamber stood a crude altar assembled from driftwood, broken bones, and objects that clearly belonged to missing people. There, Clara discovered a weathered journal describing a mysterious entity known only as the Watcher. According to the writings, it had lived beneath the island for generations, silently observing anyone who arrived. It could imitate voices perfectly, drawing victims into the darkness. Moments after reading those warnings, the group heard Noah calling for help from somewhere deep within the cave. The only problem was Noah was standing right beside them. Fear spread through the group, but they refused to abandon their search. That night, gathered around a small campfire, they tried convincing themselves there had to be a logical explanation for everything they had witnessed. Then a scream shattered the darkness. It was Ethan's voice, desperate and terrified, calling for help from somewhere within the forest. Mason and Noah immediately rushed toward the sound. Clara remained frozen in horror because Ethan was still sitting beside her. The screaming continued, growing louder and more desperate before stopping suddenly. When Mason and Noah returned, they found nothing. But before sunrise, Noah vanished without a trace. His flashlight was discovered abandoned in thick mud several hundred yards from camp. Strange symbols had appeared on nearby trees overnight, symbols none of them remembered seeing before. For the first time since arriving, the survivors stopped searching for explanations and started searching for a way off the island. Their attempt to escape led them into another horrifying discovery. Beneath the island's forest floor, hidden tunnels stretched for miles through the darkness. The passageways were filled with evidence that countless others had been trapped there before them. Clothing, watches, cameras, wallets, identification cards, and personal belongings from different eras littered the tunnels. Some items looked decades old. Others appeared recently abandoned. As they ventured deeper, they encountered figures standing motionless in the darkness. At first they appeared human. Then their reflective eyes caught the light. They remained perfectly still, silently watching. One by one, their heads slowly turned toward the group. No footsteps echoed. No voices spoke. The figures simply watched. Terrified, Mason, Clara, and Ethan fled through the tunnels as faint whispers followed them from every direction. A violent storm arrived as the survivors raced toward the shoreline. Thunder shook the island while rain hammered the forest around them. Then they finally saw the thing responsible for every disappearance. Emerging from the darkness stood a towering figure unlike anything they had ever imagined. Thin, impossibly tall, and horribly unnatural, the creature moved with slow, deliberate steps. Faces seemed to form beneath its skin before disappearing moments later. Worse still, it began speaking. First it used Noah's voice. Then Ethan's. Then Clara's. It repeated conversations they had shared in private, proving it had been watching them from the moment they arrived. The Watcher had never been hunting them. It had been studying them. As lightning illuminated the beach, dozens of pale figures emerged from the forest behind it. The survivors realized they weren't looking at victims trying to escape. They were looking at victims who had never truly left. Against all odds, Mason, Clara, and Ethan reached their boat and escaped into the storm. As the island disappeared behind a wall of fog, none of them spoke. The nightmare was over, or so they believed. Weeks later, while reviewing thousands of photographs from the expedition, Mason made a horrifying discovery. Hidden within every image was the same figure. Sometimes it stood among distant trees. Sometimes it watched from behind buildings. Sometimes it appeared only as a dark shape near the edge of the frame. It had been present the entire time. Then Mason reached the final photograph. The image had been taken after their escape, miles from the island. Standing directly behind him was the Watcher. The date and location confirmed the impossible. Whatever haunted that island had followed them home. Mason disappeared less than a year later. Clara and Ethan never spoke publicly about what happened. And somewhere beyond the maps, hidden within the fog, the island still waits in silence for its next visitors.